Good evening, distinguished online audience, and a warm welcome to the Boys to Men Foundation webinar on Today's Man. The Boys to Men Foundation is a Nigerian non-governmental organization, NGO, that was established in 2017. The foundation is dedicated to supporting boys and men to become their best selves and so positively impact the communities in which they live. To achieve its vision and mission, the Boys to Men Foundation has developed various programs and interventions, including mentorship. The ultimate goal of Boys to Men Foundation is that males become global leaders with integrity. To quote Thomas Page McBee, we must create a culture where boys are not raised to see masculinity and humanity as mutually exclusive. I'm sure you would agree that we must raise the right kind of men to face the challenges of the new age and drive equity within the social structure. Boys to Men Foundation believes that there must be fundamental changes to our way of thinking, of being, of doing, and a change in attitudes to gender roles as well. If anyone is interested in learning more about the Boys to Men Foundation, please find the contact information on the screen. And should you wish to be a part of such a laudable initiative, be sure to contact the Boys to Men Foundation. And if you've got any questions in the course of today's discourse, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box as well. The question that will naturally follow is, whose brilliant initiative is this Boys to Men Foundation? Because it's such a laudable one. And it's no other person than the amazing Mrs. Ifeoma Ifeyiwa Idigbe. Mrs. Ifeoma Ifeyiwa Idigbe is a financial and business analyst whose professional career started in banking, in corporate finance, and also development finance, what is now called SME banking. Her career has spanned banking and finance, advisory services, entrepreneurial activities and business consulting, and also capacity building. She has worked in both the private and public sectors and is currently focused on offering business advisory services to indigenous companies, as well as playing her key role in the Boys to Men Foundation. She's passionate about people development, and that is so very obvious, as she believes this is the obvious route to people becoming their best selves. Mrs. Idigbe is the founder and executive vice chairman of Boys to Men Foundation, and is also a founding trustee of some youth, environment, and gender-based organizations, amongst which is WIMBIZ, Women in Management, Business, and Public Service. She's a published author, and I must do this, Mrs. Idigbe, if you permit me. I found a book. I was blessed to get a copy of her book. It's called About Men, Random Poems, Monologues, and Reflections, and it's a beautiful read. It's what they call unputdownable. I got it and I couldn't stop reading until I'd almost finished reading the book. I'll advise you to get one. It makes excellent reading. She's a published author, a TV and podcast co-host, and has various interests that include reading and writing, obviously, the collection of paintings. And if you look behind her, we can see a few on the wall. She loves to travel, and she also loves interior and garden design. She's married to Jude and has adult children. Thank you, Mrs. Idigbe, for setting up this foundation and for the good that you do. As a mother of boys myself, it is fantastic to see the good work that this foundation is doing. And well done to you and the team. My name is Binta Max Benije. I am a financial services executive and a managing partner of a consultant firm, and I have the privilege of being your moderator this evening. Our webinar today is a conversation on today's man. The world has changed, you will agree with me. It definitely has, and there are many new and changing narratives. COVID-19 upended our world and introduced its own peculiarities for living in the 21st century. Men have changed. Men are changing. And is this a response to the demands of modern day life and to changing gender dynamics, or is it something else? That's what we'd like to discuss. This webinar wishes to provoke a discussion about the world today, the changing gender roles. We have identified 3 successful, confident men, supportive of their wives' careers, who have a different and perhaps a novel and non-traditional approach, if you like, to living full and happy lives in the new age. Each of them represents who we refer to as today's man. Really, who is today's man? What defines him? How is he different from the man of before, the man of yesterday? Are men being raised differently? Or is he simply adept at adapting to changing life circumstances, this agile man? What does this mean for gender relationships and society at large? Are there enough of today's men to make a significant difference? To discuss this very important topic, we are today have the privilege and the honor of having as our panelists for today's discussion, 3 poster boys, if you like, or more correctly, poster men who personify today's man. Spoiler alert, there will be some table shaking today in the conversations we plan to have. And so be forewarned and be ready to join this interesting conversation. Our panelists today have CVs as long as my arm, but because of our time, I obviously would have to summarize their impressive CVs. Mr. Asorerime Ighodalo, and that's a name that only the Boys to Men Foundation have the privilege of calling in full. It occurred to me that I'd never seen the full name anywhere else except now, and I had to do a little bit of homework and find out what it meant actually, but I'll take that offline with Mr. Ighodalo later on. Mr. Ighodalo is a founding partner of Banwa and Ighodalo, a leading corporate law firm in Nigeria. He obtained his first degree in economics from the University of Ibadan, a law degree from the London School of Economics and Political Science, and was admitted into the Nigerian bar in July of 1985. His core practice areas include corporate and project finance, securities and capital markets, energy and natural resources, and mergers and acquisitions. Mr. Ighodalo is Chairman, Board of Directors, the Nigeria Economic Summit Group, Sterling Bank PLC, Leverne Energy Group, and Global Mix Limited. He also sits on the boards of Main Street Technologies Limited, Cardinal Stone Partners, Okumu Oil Palm PLC, the Christopher Kolade Foundation, and the Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority, NSIA. He has constantly been ranked as a tier 1 or a leading lawyer in his areas of practice. He has authored many articles in leading law publications and delivered presentations on diverse subjects. He was gracious enough to ask me to call him by his first name, Aswe, but as we say in Pidgin, fear no gree me. So Mr. Ighodalo, if you permit me, I will refer to you today as Mr. Chairman for the purpose of this conversation. Our next panelist, who has graciously joined us this evening as well, is Mr. Dapo Akinsoya. He is the Managing Director and CEO of AXA Mansard Pensions Limited. Dapo is a proud husband and father, and he's an avid reader. Clearly, readers are leaders. He's also a finance professional with experience spanning consulting, banking, and investment management. He's currently the Managing Director and CEO of AXA Mansard. Prior to this, he had worked with Asset and Resource Management Company, ARM, in various capacities, including his role as Head Investment Management and Research, Executive Director Technical, ARM Pension Managers Limited, and he was also Executive Director of ARM Securities Limited. His further professional experience includes various roles at Citibank Nigeria Limited, Stanbic IBTC Bank PLC, and Augusta & Co Limited. He currently sits on the board of FMDQ Securities Exchange Limited as a non-executive director. And from September 2015 until recently in March 2020, he was head of the technical committee and a member of the executive committee of the Pension Fund Operators Association of Nigeria, PENOP. He's a member of the board of trustees of Boys to Men. As with Mr. Ighodalo, I will not be able to call you Dapo, Mr. Akinsoya, even though you were gracious enough as well to ask that I do that. So I think I would call you Mr. CEO, or we will go with DA for your initials. Is that okay, sir? Thank you so very much. Last but not the least is Mr. Tonye Patrick Cole, co-founder of Sahara Group. Tonye Patrick Cole, an alumnus of University of Lagos and the Harvard Business School, is currently part of the Transformational Leadership Fellowship Program at the Blavatnik School of Government in Oxford. He's the co-founder and former group executive director of Sahara Group, an energy conglomerate with operations spanning the entire energy chain in Nigeria and neighboring West African countries to East Africa and beyond. His CV, like I said, is so long. He is a man of many firsts. He has achieved so much. He was a key member of the Pact Against Corruption Initiative, PACI. In the United Nations, he was a pioneer member of the advisory board of the Private Sector Advisory Group for the UNDP Sustainable Development Group Fund, SDGF, a member of the African Philanthropy Forum, Enactus in Nigeria, amongst others. In addition to founding and to founding and running one of Nigeria's hugest energy conglomerates, Mr. Cole also spearheaded and developed what carried out by the Sahara Foundation globally. He continues working to inspire the youth of Africa through charities such as his NGO, the Nehemiah Youth Empowerment Initiative. In December of 2019, New Africa named Mr. Cole amongst the top 100 most influential Africans alive. He's a motivational speaker, he's a writer, he's a teacher and a mentor. He's married to Dr. Sylvia Cole and they have 3 adult children. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome with me our distinguished panelists for today's conversation. Thank you so very much, gentlemen, for joining us. We will move right into our conversation this afternoon. And if you'll permit me, I'd like to start with Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, Binta, let me interrupt you. Why don't we do it this way? Why don't we use initials for everybody? So AI, DA, why don't we use initials for everybody? So AI, DA, TC, that works.
Okay, that works. So AI, PT, and DA. Okay, all right, that works. Taken, and the motion is carried, Mr. Chairman. So we would move on. AI, you're the quintessential today's man. I'll start with you.
Says who, Binta?
Says the Boys to Men Foundation. We're holding you up as the poster boy for today's man. You're this strong individual who seemingly has it all together, and yet you remain in touch with current realities, and you've got a strong woman, a babe by your side. I'm curious, why do you think you're considered today's man? And you ask the question yourself, says who? Why is it that you're seen as a role model? Is it what you do? Is it what you say? Is it how you act? And I'm also curious, was it something in your culture, in your upbringing, that helped shape the man that you are today? Or did you at some point just come to this self-realization that this was the best way to go or to be?
Thank you, AI. That's like a really loaded question. And why? Maybe you should ask Mrs. Idigbe why. But then I suspect that I got into this trouble when I appeared at the WIMBIZ seminar some time back, and I was talking about my upbringing and how both my parents tried to shape my view to life and shaped my view to women and my view to women's future, women's work, allowing women to be themselves. And I think that's where I got into this trouble, where Mrs. Idigbe and maybe a few other people started thinking that maybe this is truly a man that supports his spouse and supports women. I'm a man that's in the middle of very many women, my spouse, my daughters, my sisters, my cousins, my friends, and I think I enjoy the company of women tremendously. But then I'll roll back, because part of what I say when we talk about the characteristics of a man today, looking at where Nigeria is, looking at the issues we've had in Nigeria over the last 60 years, the issues we've had particularly over the last 8 months, where the vulnerabilities of the country have been thrown up because certain things we were not prepared for. I then double back and I go back to what's the kind of man that we should have, or the kind of men that we should have in this country today. to help us move Nigeria to the next, I don't want to use next level, but to help us move Nigeria to the next stage, to help us move Nigeria from where we are today to a country that's a first world country, a dominant economic power, a country where no man or woman is oppressed, a country where there's full justice for all, a country where human rights is totally expressed and enabled and allowed, a country where foreign direct investments coming without hindrance, and a country where we can walk the streets without being afraid of our law enforcement agencies. So I go back to my own pet topic and my own pet observation on this issue, and I go back to the home. I think it all starts right from the home. And I think it's from the home that the development of the person, man and woman, starts from the cradle, from when they are born. And part of some of the problems we have, I think, from my observation, and even before I came on today, I asked my daughters and their friends, their own perception, what do they think about who should be today's man? And many of them, when I tried to distill the conversation, said, today's man, or the man for Nigeria today and Nigeria of the future, and that would raise Nigeria to the highest levels possible, should be a very responsible person, accountable, very active, involved in what is happening in the country, involved in what is happening in their family, involved in what is happening in their house, involved in what's happening in their surroundings, less self-absorbed. And I wanted to have a bit more time to ask them about that particular one, about being less self-absorbed. And they also said one thing. They said they feel, and that one coincided with my own theory, that many of our mothers have spoiled our brothers. So our brothers have been spoiled, have not been made to understand that they should always also be as hardworking as the girls. And some of them gave examples. So it comes back to the home. I personally think that it's not just about mothers, it's mothers and fathers. I think in bringing up your sons, since we're talking about men or boys to men today, in bringing up your sons, parents need to make them responsible from the get-go. Parents need to make them understand the values, the true values, integrity, honesty. Parents need to make them understand that they need to be passionate about the things they want to do. They need to be passionate about their families. They need to be passionate about their country. And parents need to make them understand the value of extremely hard work. I think if we start from the family and we inculcate this into our men or into our boys, as they grow to become men, they will be less self-absorbed and they will be very strong and good men. And part of my own upbringing has also helped me very much. When I was growing up, my mother actually is the first woman to be a permanent secretary in Nigeria. My mother became a permanent secretary in 1968. And in those days, there were no women around, either in public service or in the private sector. So she was really first in her time, and she was always amongst men. And my father was so strong because at the time, a lot of his contemporaries couldn't contemplate a woman being so out there, and a woman being so strong, perceptively, a woman being at the top of her profession, because at that time in the 60s, the thinking was most women should be either in the kitchen or somewhere else. But my father had the strength of character to allow somebody seemingly more successful than himself to cohabit with him and to be his wife. And my mother always said it at the time that she probably wouldn't have been able to marry anybody else in that generation apart from my father. So we grew up in that mode in the house. And my father, he was the head of the house, but my mother deferred to him, but he allowed my mother space to fly, which was totally unusual at the time. He allowed my mother to do her work. He allowed my mother to excel in her work. He allowed her to keep the kind of hours that was necessary to make her excel. And I've told this story somewhere else, part of our upbringing in the house, and I'll close on this, two things shaped my own thinking to the kind of person I needed to grow up to be. My father probably beat me only once in my life. My father died about 7 years ago. And I remember the day he beat me. I was 5 years old and I just had an altercation with my sister, and I hit my sister. My father took me and I got what I believe to be the beating of my life. And my father said, women are precious things. You must always, always remember that your sister, your wife, your cousins, your friends, they're precious human beings. You must deal with them in that way. You must deal with women and you must be careful with them. You must care for them and you must protect them. So that never left me. And I don't think since I was 5, I've ever raised my hand to any woman. Now, I don't think to anybody, but to any woman. But let me say to anybody. The second thing that was telling, but it's a series of things. And I've told this story somewhere else before too. The yellow bowl. As I grew up, when my sister is 4 years older than I am, when my sister went into secondary school, the day she left for secondary school, my mother called me and handed me the yellow bowl. Now, the yellow bowl, for those who've heard this story before, was full of my mother's underwear, and my mother handed me the yellow bowl and I washed, and she taught me how to wash well, and I washed and ironed everything in the yellow bowl every other day without fail till I went to secondary school and I handed the yellow bowl over to my younger brother. So growing up, there was no difference in our home between the man or the girl and the boy. We learned to cook, we learned to clean, we learned to take care of the house. So, and I think those values are important, and it helps you it shapes your life and helps you become the man you eventually become. So I think I'll always go back to the home. You start from the home, then you talk about school and talk about other experiences. But the home is so foundational and fundamental. And so I'd like to ask parents that parents need to do a lot of work. And it's at this level that we determine how our boys will be. One other thing that worries me a bit is that these days I see that our girls are so strong out there. I'm seeing some of the things that's happening out on the streets, the EndSARS movement, and I see that the girls are more predominant. And I don't see enough of our boys. So I worry a bit, but we'll get to that and we'll talk about it later. Thank you.
Thank you, AI. That was very well said. And you threw up quite a few things that are interesting. Yes, it starts from the home. It must be from the cradle. Being responsible, accountable, and involved is what will get them to become the men that we want them to be. And that way they become less self-absorbed. I like your father's quote, women are precious things. I wish we still had the mold that was used to make him around so that we could churn out more of his kind in today's world. Definitely sorely needed. You said something as well about your mother being such a strong woman and your father being supportive, and never supporting her all the way in becoming all that she then achieved, the first permanent secretary in the whole of Nigeria. That's a major achievement. It's no mean feat at all. And, men like that are few and far between, like you've said yourself. I would segue it from that point to talk to DA. And DA, I'm picking on you because when I read your profile, the first thing that I saw in the very first line was to say Dapo is a proud husband and father. And I liked that. It warmed the inner cockles of my heart to read that. So you obviously have a wife who is accomplished in her own right. And you definitely should be proud of her. Did you at any time, however, and I'm skating on thin ice here, I know, feel insecure about her success? Has her success been a threat to you at any time? Or are you of the late Mr. Ighodalo's enlightened brigade who believes that, in fact, a man's success can be attributed to his wife's support and vice versa? And to push it a bit further, I'm reminded about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who died recently, and how, in the rehashing of her story, a movie has been made. And in that movie, we see in all the frames a very supportive husband, a man who clearly didn't have a problem with his ego and was happy to take the back seat and support his wife to become all that she ended up being, a Supreme Court justice and a woman who made a difference in the United States. And I guess her influence, percolates to other parts of the world as well. So my question for you, DA, is first, your wife's success at any time? Has there ever been an issue? Have you ever felt threatened? Or do you think that you, as a matter of fact, helped in helping her becoming what she is today? Is ego a problem, for you or for today's man? And how would you advise that we discuss this very sensitive matter?
All right, thank you very much for the also loaded question. I'm not sure how to tackle this, but I'll try my best. So in a word, I do not see my wife as a threat in any way, or, I don't have any issues with her success in her career or whatever endeavor she casts her minds and energies towards. I think, in today's time and age, I think it's important for men especially to appreciate the really important role that women play. I mean, the way I look at things is, one, we need to appreciate, first of all, our shared humanity, and to understand that women really account for more than half of human population today. And without women, there are lots of things we won't be able to do. Society as it is today just wouldn't be, So I think men have to be really open-minded. Men have to look at, women as those they share their humanity with. Men have to look at women, especially as partners in perhaps a common goal or vision of life, partner in terms of shared values, shared principles, partner in terms of, how you approach life, what you're trying to get out of life, partners in terms of your ambitions, how you raise your children, how you manage your family. So that's how I look at it. I also think that men really have to get away from this idea of they being the perhaps primary provider and thinking they have to project this image of being a macho man, not showing emotion, right? I think society increasingly is moving away from that. I think society has to move away from that mindset.
Yeah.
And in a way, that's how I have approached my relationship with my wife. Certainly, I often think more in terms of it's easier for me to perhaps visualize how my wife has supported me in my own career and life. Sometimes I wonder, have I really supported her? But she tells me, I have. I did have a conversation with her before this meeting as well to ask her a couple of questions, just to get her sense of some of these questions. And, for her, right, there was a point in her career where she felt she had to take time away from the day-to-day grind of going to the office and all that. And in today's world, where most families are double income families, right? And I do realize that a lot of men still don't think that way, but for me, it's not a problem at all. It was something we had to sit down and think about, and I really didn't have any problem with it, because what was uppermost in my mind was her well-being, her happiness, her own sense of fulfillment, wanted to do something outside of what she did professionally. And at the time, I didn't know how it would affect us. I didn't know what it would lead to. But in a way, in some kind of long-winded way, it's sort of how I've landed in this spot now where I'm a speaker on the Boys to Men, talk session. Because one way or another, she found herself working with Wimbies and developed lots and lots of really valuable relationships that I have also shared. And one way or another, I found myself here. So you never really know, how one decision at some point will what it will lead to eventually. So one of my own principles or approaches to life, right, is that rather than focus on myself, right? In this spirit of understanding our obligations or responsibilities to humanity, one of the things I think is that one of our fundamental responsibilities as human beings, right, is to continue the perpetuation of humanity, right? The continued improvement and development and advancement, right, of humanity, of mankind, of the world in which we live in. That involves many things. But one of the ways I've distilled it down to is, look, are the things I'm doing making somebody else happier, right? Are the things I'm doing, are some of my decisions leading to the progress of another human being? And even if it's just my family unit, even if it's just my wife, and the way we take decisions and the way we support one another, I think I'm contributing in one way or form, right, to the advancement of humanity. Because ultimately, her happiness translates into how we raise our kids, the sort of value system our children learn, right, and how they go out there and interact and engage with other people. So really, that's how I look at it.
Thank you so very much, DA. You get the Boys to Men Foundation first sticker for being a he for she. Like you rightly said, 50% of society is women, and if it's like if you're doing anything in this world and not carrying them along, it's like a bird flying with one wing and not being able to achieve optimal flight or to soar to the levels that they should. We definitely must carry our women along. And I like your view about men, jettison this age-long idea that they're the primary provider, they must remain the macho man, they can't show emotions, they must just be the provider, the enforcer, and all of that. That's thinking that should really be reviewed, and that narrative must be changed. Thank you so very much for reminding us about that. And that leads me to the question for you, PT, and my PT is not TC, not terms and conditions. I prefer PT for Pastor Toye. You are an ordained minister. We can't run away from that fact. And we live in this society where patriarchy remains in force, however you slice it and dice it. Yes, there's been an advancement. Yes, things are getting better, and men are becoming more of today's men. But I'm compelled to ask you this, to talk to us without going heavy on the theological bit about what it means when they say submission. This much vaunted injunction about submission that's harped upon day after day. DA talked about how you have to be the macho man and how you're just the provider, and you just stay in that role and you keep doing that no matter what happens until, sometimes the men just crumble underneath all of that. And yet in the middle of that, they're just saying the woman must submit, the woman must just stay at home in some instances and just take care of the children. And, that's their position, and it ain't changing. And I ask this because we see that before now, it used to be that the woman stayed at home and the man brought in the bacon. But now the wife brings in the sausages. DA alluded to the fact that many families are two-income homes. So the wife also brings that in. And so my add-on question to you, apart from the submission bit, so that you can tackle it together, is also the bit about the role of the father in bringing up the children. So before now, raising the children was left essentially to the woman, and the father was provider, enforcer, and the macho man, but the mother was left to bring up the children. But now that the mother is even contributing, and forget the financial aspect, but isn't there a role for the father to play as well in influencing the children, in sharing the values, just like AI talked about earlier on? What is your view?
Okay. Excellent questions, and again, thank you, Ifeoma, for having me here, and Binta, thanks for the excellent questions. I'll take the second one, and then I'll end up with the first one, because that's where my very, very, very senior brother actually started off from. And that foundation is exactly what it is. The home as a place where you nurture the difference between male and female. And if you do not take care of how you're bringing up both your male children and your female children, you are going to create a big problem for society down the line. So everything that you're going to end up seeing, whether it's from the religious end or it's just from cultural or theological or whichever way, really has its foundation at the end of the day in how the upbringing at the home is. And so the father has a huge part to play. And I remember when my wife had to go to England, and she first went on an exchange, school exchange program. She was working in Louth, and she went for a year. She was meant to have gone for a year, then all the strikes and all of that. She ended up going for longer. But when she first left, I was left with two of the children, my son and my daughter, and she had the baby with her in England, and I had to bring up those two and take care of them. And I remember at that point, I was a young father, working extremely hard all the time, and making the mistake that a lot of fathers make of delegating the upbringing of your children to nannies and all of that. And I remember one day, my son began to withdraw. He just stopped speaking. And the headmistress called me one day and said, I should come. And I got in. So she was this in Corona, she was my teacher as well when I was in Corona at the time, and they were in Corona. And so she calls me and she says, who's looking after your children? Oh. Now, it was the first time that I had to sit down and begin to think about it in the way that I never would have considered. Because all the while, there I was thinking that the main aspect of it was just go out and just make sure that you provide for the home. And forgetting that just being there and making sure that your children have you there is important. Now, this boy must have been, I believe he was Corona, he was about 9 years old at the time, probably about 8 years old at the time. And there was a psychological impact of not having his father there. You are in the same house, but you are not there. And so he withdrew and just stopped speaking. He would speak at home. So I didn't even notice that there was anything happening at home, but he would get into school and his voice would just disappear. And so that, for me, was just one of the first instances of realizing that it is just as important to have both the father and the mother involved in the upbringing of the children. You cannot take one and leave the other. They are both extremely important. And now, let me move forward into the second part of it. And as a minister and all of that, there was a time in the church where I was in charge of the men's fellowship, and we called it Real Men at that time. And as head of the fellowship and men's fellowship, we thought there was believing that what we were trying to do was just look at men and make sure that the real man came out and you were just a real man, a complete man at home, at work, and all of that. Now, where I got most of the information as to what exactly was happening was not from the men themselves. It was from their wives, it was from the women coming in and telling me about the challenges they were having at home with the husbands. And I then had to move from real men to counseling. And we then found out that one of the major problems that you had was on this issue of submission. It almost came up in every single instance where there was a challenge in the marriage. You had two things happening. From the women's part, from the man's part, you had an issue of where he was saying that she does not respect me. So it was always an issue of respect, and it was an issue of submission. From the woman's part, it was always the issue that he is trying to enforce submission on me, and you cannot force submission. And this became something that I had to then begin to look for. I'll just say look for the answer through scripture to try and balance it. And where I found the answer was in two parts. The first aspect of it is that all the men will hold on to submission. The Bible says you should submit. She doesn't submit. She's a stubborn woman. She doesn't submit. And you would find that the very next verse to that then says that it's a commandment for the man to love the wife. Never is the woman commanded to love the man. And why is that the case? And I will explain to them that it is natural that any woman that a man shows love to will naturally give herself to the man. So if you want submission, if that is what you want, then love your wife. Love her with everything. Shower her with love, kill her with love and all of that. Naturally, she will submit. But if you don't love her, you're into wahala. The last part of it, the second part where I found an answer, was going back to the very beginning in Genesis 1. And Genesis 1:27, I believe, 26 says that God says, let us make man in our own image. 27 then goes that he made man in his image, male and female, together at the same time, at the very same time, the spirit. No, none was higher, none was less, and all. This was before he formed the body of man. He created man and woman exactly the same. One was not higher, one was not lower, one was not on the left, one was not to the right. Both the spirit being of male and female created at the same time. And then I say to them that, you see, as far as God is concerned, this whole thing about you must do this, you must do that, it's not there. We were all created equal. Now, each one was given different attributes, and the attributes complement each other. And you can never be complete without the attribute of the other. You can't be a woman, neither can you be a man. You need both attributes. And so that's basically the way I have come across it, the way I've dealt with it, the way I've worked with it. And I found that it has worked a lot. For men, very simple. Just do what God commanded you to do. Love this woman. Just love her. And that submission that you're looking for, you will get it. All right.
Thank you so very much, PT. And so, men, there you have it. You want submission? Just love your wife. Shower her with it. And women, respect the men. I like what you said about not delegating the upbringing of your children. It is so critical in this day and age. I shared with you the story I read of a man who was so sad and talking to his grown-up adult son now, where he mentioned to him that when the guy comes home, he feels that he comes to see his wife, their mother, and not him. And then so he asked him, you know, why don't we have a relationship? What happened? And the father then went on to say how he thought, you know, erroneously, that all he had to do was be the provider, and all he had done all those years was provide, and he had been distant with the children. And he thought that he will have time later on to be able to make up for it and get to know them. But alas, that was not to be, because that time passed. And here they are, and there's no relationship anymore. So it is indeed a big nugget that I am taking away, that it's important that we don't delegate their upbringing and that we spend quality time with them, being present, loving them, emotionally available. It's not incompatible with being a man at all, and it's something today's men need to know about. Thank you so very much, PT. But on the back of that, what has just occurred to me to ask is to say, you talked about your son shutting down and not speaking when he got to school. Men and boys as well are not known for being great conversationalists, you'll agree. It's the ladies who say talk, 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 but men usually don't talk. How can men be friends with their boys? I mean, that given that both don't talk as much as they should, they're not like ladies who are quick to open up, who are quick to verbalize how we're feeling or what we're thinking. And could you share some more about how you were able to get through to your son, or you know, any other example that you have that might teach us a lesson or two? How do you get to be friends with your sons? You know, they don't talk. I mean, I've got 2 teenage boys, and it's always a struggle. The other day I said to their father, I'm trying to talk to your son. I said, don't worry, when he wants to talk, he'll talk. But I want him to talk. I want to sit with him and talk. I want to know what's going on in his mind. I know what he's thinking at any point in time. What are your wise words for us?
Okay, so there are different ways to do it, and I'll just use my own example. So the first thing is that you must find a way that you can communicate. And how do you communicate best? One of the ways that I found to communicate with someone who is introverted and all of that is to write. And so every now and then I'll just write a letter to my son. And so I'll write a letter, he'll read the letter, it makes, sorry?
Even though you live in the same house?
Yeah, write a letter. I'm serious. There are certain things. And so write a letter. Another way that we began to stay in touch was that we started playing football together. So we'd go out on weekends, every other weekend and all of that, and we'll go and play games. So old men, young men, all together play games. And the third way that I found that we began to at least get in touch with each other's space was always every year. I'll pack all of them and then we'll go out, we'll go off somewhere, go on holiday, spend time together and all of that. So these are three ways. You're relaxed, no work, nobody is harassing you and all of that. You just spend time with your children. You go out to play games whenever you can. So if it's football, then you either watch football together, play football. Now, these are boys for if that's what they like. So you speak football, watch football, play football together. So you find some commonality that you want to discuss. And then around work, as he graduated and he now started looking for a job and all of that, then those things, the advice to work, advice on interviews, what should you do? Just give advice and just speak to them. Ask them every now and then, okay, how are you doing? What have you found? What challenges do you have at work? Now, it is mainly your responsibility. Now, you as a parent, most times you have to make that effort and don't wait for the child to make the effort coming back. You really have to go out and push yourself to do that. And I remember growing up that my father was very, he was to himself. And for us as children, if you are not spoken to, you don't speak, you just mind your own business. And that's how we grew up. And I just made up my mind that in this particular case, we're going to be different, because as we got older, thankfully, unlike the case that you shared earlier on, for us, when we grew older, my father now began to make a huge effort. Now he's the one calling everybody, pulling everybody, let us all stay together and all of that. But you don't have to wait till that long. You can actually begin to make the effort as your children are growing up. Yeah, teenagers will do what teenagers will do, but just reach out to them and speak to them. So make the effort. So I'm making the effort and it's fine by me.
Binta, if I can just quickly add to what Tonya said, about your father doing things together with you. With my brother and I, there were certain things my father did to bring us together, apart from helping with the homework and things like that. My father would give you his loaded gun. My father liked hunting. So he will load his gun and he'll give his gun to you. And he'll say, we're going hunting, and he would have told you about how to carry a loaded gun, the responsibilities you carry with a loaded gun. You are carrying his loaded gun. So you feel important, you feel like as if you're grown up and you want to engage with that grown up. So it worked, because we then were easy with him and we could discuss anything with him and it was easy. So we started from the loaded gun, he'd give us his loaded gun and we go hunting, and when we felt tired, he would ask one of the other hunters to take us back to the farmhouse or something. So that was that. He also told us about driving. So he had this rubber steering wheels that we put, both my brother and I would sit in front with him. We'll put the rubber steering wheels there. He'll have his proper steering wheel and he'll be driving, I'll be telling us about driving. So we bonded and it was easy for us then to have a good relationship growing up and to be able to discuss anything with him. And all our friends were his friends and my father could discuss anything with you, so it was easy. So I think I don't have a son, but if I had one, what I would have tried to do was make sure I made myself fully available. And I have a lot of godsons, so I tried to replicate that with them. Just make myself available to them, and I think it works.
Excellent, thank you, AI. I was going to circle back to you, so we'll continue with you since you started that conversation. And I've got a question. This culture that we're in tells us boys shouldn't cry, okay? It's only girls who cry. There's this key cultural challenge or perception that men should not be vulnerable. Being vulnerable and putting your authentic self out there is a weakness. You talked about talking with your father a short while ago. and him being friends with your friends as well. So I'm sure he must have been open. He must have come down to your level, as we say, for you to be able to open up to him and for them to be able to engage with your father. What is your advice to someone who is told, man up, be a hard guy, boys don't cry, you know all of that? How is today's man going to balance not appearing as a weakling, but also being vulnerable and open enough so that the women and the other people in their lives can get to know them, and so that there'll be better relationships and a better world ultimately all around? What would you advise us to do, sir?
For me, that's a hard question, because I think I hold my hand up there and I may have failed on that score. I think, growing up, my father didn't say so expressly, and I don't think I saw my father cry only once when my mother died. That's the only time I ever saw my father cry. And it was unsaid, but it was felt that you needed to be strong at all times. And part of showing that strength was not showing vulnerability, Growing up, and after all the many experiences I've had through life, I know that's not strictly correct. I remember a few weeks ago, my wife told me one day that you look fully stressed, ready to cry. So I'll leave the room for you and lock the door, so please cry, But honestly, I think men should learn to show vulnerability. It helps with relationships. It helps with understanding. I grew up thinking that it was, not that it was a sign of weakness, but that it was better for you to stay strong. But it helps with your understanding relationships, even with those you work with, those you interact with, and definitely in the home. But that doesn't mean you should turn yourself into a crybaby. I think it's strictly important that you should have the absorbing capacity to take good and bad, and to be the one that's there to console, condole, help, lift those who are around you. I remember when my mother fell ill. She was ill 3 days before she died. And when I got to the hospital, on the second day, I knew she was going to die. And I was in the ward with her. She was in this ward, and my brother and I were in the ward, and there was an auntie of mine. So I stepped out to the balcony to cry, and I really cried, But I could have cried in the room, when away from my mother, when the others were there. But, this mental thing, I stepped out. That was probably the only time I cried, apart from the day she was buried, But I stepped out to the balcony and I really, really cried. And I felt better. And I started thinking about, okay, what do we do? How are we going to do? Let me take charge of all the things. And the same thing happened to me. My father died, and I was on my way to him when he died. And when I got there, he was still in the hospital, on the hospital bed. And I asked everybody else to leave, and I held him and I cried. So I can count, I've cried 3 or 4 times that I remember, those kind of, but it's good. It helps you. It shows that you are human, and you need to do a bit more of it so that people also know you're human and you're vulnerable. And when I talk to my godsons, I tell them, show emotion. I'm not great at it. I try. The older I get, I've become a bit better, but it also helps. It helps with your relationships. It helps, So I agree with you. And us fathers, I think we need to let our sons know that, and even mothers, but if hearing from the mother, the boy may not take strength from it as hearing from the father. We need to let our sons know that they need to show some vulnerability. They need to show that they care that way too. And they need to show that when they really feel stressed and stretched, they can step into their homes or step into an area or step in with their friends and show emotion and show vulnerability. But the downside to that is that in today's world, sometimes people take advantage of your vulnerability. So sometimes you think that you don't really want anybody taking advantage, but you need to balance this out, And a fully confident man, even if people take advantage of you, you step out and you go on and you continue doing the things you're doing. So I think as a father, you need to let your sons know that it's not a bad thing to show vulnerability. It's not.
Thank you so very much, AI. Today's man can be vulnerable, and it's okay for boys to cry. Thank you so much. Our distinguished online audience, you may please put your questions in the Q&A box, and I see a few have come through. Earlier on in the conversation, AI, you mentioned the EndSARS. It's the front burner topic of conversation right now, and we cannot pretend it's not happening. So we will talk about that in a short while, but we've got a couple of questions, and if you permit me, I'll just jump to them very quickly. DA, someone said you did not answer the question about ego in your answer earlier on, and I think my question had been, how do you handle that? Is it a problem for you, or how should men handle it? Barack Obama had no such ego. He was quick to say that Michelle was his equal or even better. And, he was happy to be called Michelle's husband. I mean, he'll come out and say, he won't say I'm Barack Obama, President of the United States. He'll say I'm Michelle's husband, So is it a problem for you? What would you advise today's man to do about handling that fragile ego?
All right. Please pardon me for omitting that part of the question, right? In thinking about this question of ego, what I think about is how a man defines or thinks about his value, his value and self-worth, right? And what sort of occurs to me is that I think there's an inverse correlation between the level of self-worth that a man has, or a man's self-perception of himself, and the level of ego. And I think perhaps the more insecure, the more unsure or shaky one's set of values are, then this question of ego becomes to be more dominant or more significant. And I think it's important to instill in young men the right sort of value system, right? So that perhaps this question of ego does not even arise. So interestingly, when I was invited to this talk and I was then asked to, put a profile together, I thought about all the profiles I had been putting together all through my career, and it occurred to me that I often emphasize more the things I have done professionally. So I thought, okay, let me do something a bit different this time. Let me emphasize something out of how I see myself at the core, at the core. And I thought first and foremost, for me, I think it's my wife and my children, it's my family unit, right? And, talking about the question of vulnerability, after all is said and done, I think I am perhaps at my most vulnerable, right? When it comes to my wife and children. And in terms of what you also asked me about, my wife and her contribution and my contribution to her as well. When I was thinking about the question today, I sort of thought back to the process, let me call it a process that led to us getting married, right? And I remember distinctly that it was actually a conscious decision. It was a fallout of a conscious sort of process of analysis, right? To first decide what I wanted out of life, who I thought would give me the proper grounding and support, who would share the same sort of outlook or view of life as I did, right? Someone who would help me keep, those negative qualities, things like ego, in check. And, I sort of thought about, the female friends I had at the time. And long before we started dating, for me, it was an objective. It was a target I had that, look, this is the person I would like to get married to, right? for those various reasons. And, you know, so far it's worked out well. She's helped me in terms of maintaining the right value system, in terms of my outlook on life. Certainly, I would say she's helped me in terms of keeping my ego in check. I mean, at the end of the day, I think men really need to understand what's most important, right? And if you're thinking about higher order things, you know, more noble objectives, you know, this question of ego becomes really irrelevant because you're more focused on perhaps those more noble objectives or desires that you have.
Binta, let me just add something there, and I'll just share a little experience. I must have been about 14 years old, and I went to a public reception with my parents. And my mother was introduced as Mrs. Fola Ighodalo, first woman farm sec, chairman of this, chairman of that, and her husband. You know, and you know, everybody in the room went quiet because obviously the person didn't know my father and didn't know how to address her and just said and her husband. And my father said, yes, the husband of that beautiful, most successful woman, and the whole room burst out laughing. You know, it just shows my father, some things didn't bother him. It wasn't an ego thing. And for me too, you know, if I tell people my claim to fame, my wife, my daughter, you know, and things like that, my sister, things like that, you know, but, you know, it doesn't bother. People say, oh, they know your wife, they know your daughter. And I said, fine, you know, it doesn't, you know, the important thing, like Dapo said, is for you to know who you are, you know, strength of character, be a confident man. You must grow, you must teach your children to grow up in confidence and to be confident in their own skin, to know who they are and not to be afraid and to be there to be supportive. And it's never a problem if you grow up confident.
Can I jump in?
Sure.
Am I allowed to? Okay, yes, so there's something that I just want to add there. There was a time when when I was starting up Sahara, and we had moved everything. I didn't have anything, no income at the time, because everything that I had were put into this business, and so we're not earning any income. For that period in life, my wife supported us. She paid for everything. It was her salary that we were living on and all. You know, not only was I living on her salary, I'm a mister. She's a doctor. Everywhere we went, it's Mr. and Dr. Cole, Dr. Cole. You know, people would get so upset in Nigeria that, why are you calling that one doctor? You know, for what? She's a doctor. I'm a mister. You just know who you are. Be confident in yourself. I had absolutely no problem whatsoever with my wife working and supporting us. She paid for everything with her school, with her housemanship. What's that word job as a doctor? You know, and that was what we survived on. Now today, I'm able to support her completely. And I will be complaining, no, she has everything, she can have it. Because when I needed it, when I had nothing, when I was, at that time, when I was pushing everything, she was there. She stood by me, she supported with her money, supported with her time. I was traveling. Lovely woman, bless you. Sylvia, love you. Don't worry, this to you.
Binta, same thing, you know, when I started my law firm, you know, there are days I didn't have money for petrol, you know. Wow. And there are two things: the money she gave me and the money I took from her bag. So she'll go into the bathroom. When she's in the bathroom, I'll go into her handbag, take the money, and I'll escape before she comes out. And every day she left the money there, you know. So, you know, it's not an ego thing. And there was a period for about a year, you know, this kind of thing Tonya is talking about. You know, she took care of nearly everything, practically everything. The only thing I insisted that I must do by force, although I didn't have money, was pay the rent. But every other thing she did. Every other thing, you know. So like Tonya said, so if today now they tell me she's maxed out my credit card, you know, I can't complain. Not a problem.
Awesome.
So really, you know, with partners like that, how can ego possibly enter? There's no question. You can't have ego problem now.
Absolutely. And Ime Ojo-Obong has a comment in the box where she says, I put it like this: besides every successful man is his wife. It is a partnership. And, just to collaborate what you've all just said. Thank you so very much. That's why you are poster men for today's event. You're truly today's men. I like what Moso Gobanjo said here, and it's to you, Mr. Igodalo. Your parents were ahead of their time. So balancing ego and respect is a challenge for today's relationships. But like you've said, you're giving us cues and pointers as to how to make it work. And God bless all your wives, beg your pardon, for the contributions and the lovely words from you all for them as well. I'm sure they're blushing wherever they are listening to this. I have a question for you, and it's directed at you, Sir Aswe. I agree that education starts at home. And my question is, how can a boy from a broken family grow in this society with the right values? And if I might add, what should today's man do? And this is my own question on the back of that. What should today's man do for boys who do not have male figures in their lives? They might be from broken homes, they might be from single parent homes, or just haven't had a positive male influence in their lives. What should today's man do?
That's a great question, because of my emphasis on the value of the home and the upbringing from the home.
Yeah.
The easy one is the broken home, that both parents don't live together or are not together for any reason doesn't mean they should abdicate their responsibility to their son or to their kids. One of the things you must do as soon as the child is old enough to understand is to find a way to explain to them that mommy and daddy are not together again for certain reasons. But that doesn't remove the fact that mommy and daddy love you both very much, and both parents need to work extra hard to make those children, because, the broken home thing sometimes impacts many children. The impact is not reflected until maybe later in their life. Sometimes it's early, sometimes it's later. But both parents need to work extra hard to make sure that impact doesn't occur. So the father needs to work extra hard on the son and the daughter, because your daughter needs to grow up confident that, it doesn't necessarily mean relationships end this way. You have to bring up and work harder on your son and the mother too. So that's the easier one. Both parents just have to be responsible to know they even have to work even much harder. For the son or the child or the boy that didn't know his father, for instance, or who maybe lost his father, it's a bit more difficult, because you then find the woman having or trying to look for a father figure for the boy. And sometimes it depends on how it's done. The boy may resent it, and that causes its own problems, So what I try to do with women I know who are in that situation, some of them are my very good friends and things, is that, you try to work hard on the boy, both from the mother perspective, and then keep talking to him about those things that are normally men conversation. And if you have brothers and older men friends who you can introduce to him, who would also help him, it'll help. But it's much harder, the woman needs to work very hard. Sometimes she needs to start thinking like a man and try and engage him and talk to him. But I've seen many mothers successfully do it. And they've brought up very strong, capable, competent, responsible young men who have then grown into leaders in the community. And my favorite story of all time is the Indian girl that grew up in a whorehouse and went to Harvard, and she was well-rounded. And I tell people that if that girl that grew up in the whorehouse, they weren't even clear which of the whores was her mother, but all the women came together to bring her up, clear in their minds that she wouldn't end up like them. And they all brought money together, sent her to good schools, and she ended up in Harvard. And now she's running a foundation where she's trying to get women out of that kind of life, So if a child can come up from that background and become who she has become, I think we can work hard at making sure that children from broken homes or one-parent homes grow up. It's tougher, it's more difficult, but it's doable. And I've known, like I said, many mothers who have managed it, and they've done a great job.
Thank you, AI. DA, do you want to chip in? PT?
Yeah,
Any
Yes. The only thing I would chip in, right, is that in addition to having, perhaps, role models, physical role models, people in their lives, relatives or friends, or mentors. One of the things that I have grown up, I have appreciated as I have become older is inculcating or encouraging a reading culture, right? And I say that within the context of, in terms of looking for role models or mentors, right? I think of that as, and I think there are different ways. So one is people people you have access to. You can also have role models who you have no contact with whatsoever. Perhaps people who have even died, people who lived decades, years ago, right? And read about their stories, learn about them, read about the challenges they faced. Because I think in almost every situation in life, right, there is some precedent. There's somebody who's lived that experience and come out of it, right? And there are ways you can learn and practice or inculcate those, how they came, the learning points from those experiences into your own life. So that's one other way that I think that question can be addressed.
Thank you so very much. I've got an anonymous attendee who has a question, especially to AI and TC. So TC, if you'll just take the lead there. My question is, how do you reconcile the modern trend of women telling men how to be men? Women nowadays have an idea of what a man should be. What do you think about this? For instance, TC, you mentioned submission, and you said most of the submission issues of information you received came from the women. Shouldn't it be men like you all on this platform who should educate us on what a man should be?
Anonymous attendee, I wish I knew who he or she is, because he or she has asked so many questions here, really very engaging. I've been answering some offline. But look, in today's world, the first thing that you would know, almost going into the last question that was answered and into this one, is that the world in where you would have that home where you say you don't have a lot of broken homes is something of the past. Today you have a lot of broken homes, but as a result also of the amount of information that people can get, women and men have access to so much information today. So much information. It's something that Dako just talked about. So it's nearly impossible that you are going to find anybody, male or female, that does not have an opinion from what they've read, from what they've seen, from what they've been influenced about what would make a good woman or a good man. You can no longer stay in a bubble and expect that no woman is going to tell you what is acceptable behavior, or how best to do, or give you some advice as to how you can become a better man. And likewise, men would look at women and also be able to tell the same thing. Where am I going with this? The point is that we are in a very connected world today. Very, very connected. We are in a world where communication goes both ways, men to women, women to men, and some other variations of all of that. But you are in a world now where communication is important. The day you shut yourself out from getting feedback from one side of the equation, you are going to have problems. It just means that you are only hearing one side, which means that you are going to do everything wrong. You are not going to understand how to deal with women. You're not going to understand how to speak to them. You're not going to understand how to treat them. You're not going to understand what makes them happy. You're not going to understand when to keep quiet and when to talk. You're not going to understand when it's better to listen, because you just don't know. All you hear is one side of the equation. And most women, in fact, the psychology of the world will tell you today that if you are only looking at one side, for a world where there are more, I think Dapo mentioned that, where there are more women than men, you are missing out on a large percentage of what the world is. So please, for goodness sake, listen. You see, there's no problem in hearing what people's opinion is of what the man should be. No problem. Once you have heard all of that, be man enough to distill which one of those things work for you and which one does not work for you. 100% will not work for you. Everybody, a man would like to wear green shoes, another one will hate green shoes. It's okay. You decide what works for you. But getting information, I have no problem with that. So women will tell you that they like a man who will send flowers to them. Fine. If you like sending flowers, please, by all means, send flowers. But don't shut your ears to hearing the opinion. Take in the opinion and then be man enough yourself to know yourself and decide for yourself which one works best for you and which one doesn't. But that's my opinion.
Thank you so very much. AI, do you want to add to that? Your name was mentioned.
Just you know, we're all products of our upbringing, basically, and boys and girls in growing up have had various and varied experiences. And I tell people that even children that grew up in the same home sometimes see things differently, not to talk of people that grew up in different homes and different backgrounds. So I go back to exactly what Tonya said. I think it's a communication thing. When you are going to get married, when you have a friend, when you even have a co-worker, I think it's important that people can talk to each other. Again, growing up, most men haven't learned properly the art of communication. But I think as time goes on, when they strive to keep relationships and to keep relationships at a high level, where the relationships are strong and good, then they learn that they need to open their mouths and open their ears. And like Tonya said, know when not to speak, particularly, and then also when to speak, you know. So communication is fundamental, and it's work in progress for most men. Most men keep learning the art of communication till the day they pass on, you know. It's work in progress, you know. But most women are getting better at teasing the ability to properly communicate out of men. And it's also work in progress. If a woman cares enough for you, she'll continue working on you until she gets you to where she wants you to be.
Thank you so very much, AI. I have a question I think is interesting here. What do you, the panelists, think a young man of today should look for in a prospective wife or life partner? I thought it was important that we answer that.
Let us answer that
one. No, I was going to leave that to Dapo first. You know, Dapo is closer. Dapo is closer to where we are now. You know, I'm kind of getting geriatric. Dapo,
we'll use seniority now.
That is a very tricky question, in my opinion. I think every man has to decide for himself what's most important to him and what he's looking for, one, out of life and out of a life partner. That then will help you define the qualities that you should look for in a spouse. So I cannot, I can't prescribe to you, right? I can tell you my own experience. I can tell you what's important to me, but that may not necessarily be what works for you.
You know, I think there are some general principles, you know, yeah. if we talk generally. I think one thing that's very important is the person must be your friend. Yeah. You know, you and the person you must share common ideals, common things. You must be true friends, you know. You must be able to talk to each other. You must be able to understand each other. And then for many of us also, the person must be a person of very strong and high integrity and values. Person, for me, you know, must be a fun-loving person. You must see the funny side of life. You must be a hard worker, and you must be considerate. You know, but we're all human beings. We all have plenty of faults. You know, the important thing is that, like Dapo, if you find the person that fits your identikit, then you must also be able to allow for that person's weaknesses, because you also have many weaknesses, and you expect her to allow for your weaknesses. So you must allow. For me, there were a few things that, you know, I tried to be rigid about, but I grew up very quickly to find out that you can't be rigid about those things. My wife takes her time to get ready for going out. You There's no, I can't argue that. And for a while, the thing used to, I'd say, okay, let's separate this. There's the business meeting, there's the party. The party, no problem. The business meeting, but I learned to deal with it. She's an executive herself, and she runs her own business, and she gets to her meetings on time. So I said, okay, let me work this out, and I reworked it, and we found a comfortable way. So that's part of it. So the key really is to be able to also have the broad mind to be able to absorb some of the things that come from the other party or the other side, and accentuate those things that are the strong qualities and important things, and try and work on the things that are not as you want them to be. There's no perfect human being, and there can never be.
Okay. Thank you. Those very useful pointers. Thank you so very much. I've got a question here, 2 questions that are similar, so I'll just bunch them together. One says, it is often said that there's a thin line between confidence and arrogance. How do we then bring up our sons in a way that their confidence is not mistaken for arrogance? And the second one, close to it, says, a lot of our young men today lack confidence that Aswe spoke about. Is it attributable to the fathers not connecting to their sons emotionally? Many find it difficult to talk to girls. Is it the social media intervention in their lives that has replaced face-to-face interaction? So I'm throwing that to all the panelists. Please feel free to jump in.
Let me try this one. These are some hot questions. All right. So all the way back from when we were growing up, girls always mature faster than men. Okay. All right. So the first thing that you would find out is as boys get into teenage years, the girls that they were playing around with in school and all of that suddenly mature more than them. And at that period, a bit of their confidence goes because they now can no longer talk to these girls that they were talking to. And older boys are talking to the girls and they're just confused in that period. So it's important that in the age where your children are going through their teenage years, that is really when you have to, especially for the boys, you have to look at their confidence at that point in time. Because they're going through puberty, they're coming to a sense of who they are, and all of a sudden the girls have just shut up. They've gone far beyond them. Something else I also found out about this same period, and I discovered it from a roundabout way. I kind of discovered it, first of all, from the workplace, that when we were then employing, we suddenly found out that in the recruitment, because we do by merit, we are not in north, south, east, west, boy, girl, nothing like that. We just, if you have merit, you get in. And I know you, I don't know you, come through the back door, all those things don't work for us. And we suddenly found out that at the entry point, we were consistently finding that the women were doing better than the men consistently over the last couple of years in aptitude tests, exams, whatever. And so we were bringing in about 60%, 65% more women coming into the workforce than men. And it began to trouble me a bit that why this divide. And then I got to, because I mentor young children as well, I got to go for a couple of graduation, secondary school graduation into university, and then university graduation coming out into the workforce. And that's where I began to notice it, that most of the prize-giving awards in the schools and all of that, you would hear woman, 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 one man, girl, 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 one man, first class, first class, first class, first class man. So it began to cause me to think that what exactly is going on here? And it's psychology that is not proven at this point. So I'm just speaking about what I sensed. And I kind of got the sense that women, for some reason, in more recent times, either the parents were telling them that, you have to work harder, it's a man's world, you have to do twice as much as a man must do, I don't know. But I kind of sense that girls began to get this feeling that if they were going to make it in life, they needed to work twice as hard, do a lot more. And what that began to bring out is that women started finding a lot more confidence in going out and doing things. And somehow it's begun to rub off on the boys because they're finding out that when it comes to the competition, that they're not doing as well. And the society kind of has given them this right that it's a man's world, so you should get it, and they're not getting it. So it began, that's why this program that you're doing is an issue. It's something that is very, very important, because it begins to go into the psychology of men, that it's not, if you push harder, you will get what you want. So you cannot get something if you are lazy. But if you sit down and expect that it will just come to you, it will become a problem. So you must push. And I believe Asue mentioned it again when he talked about the protests and NSAS protests. You are finding out that the women are coming out more. They're the ones driving the initiative. They're the ones doing the money. They're the ones bringing it. They're the ones organizing the food. They're the ones speaking. And what is happening is that they just feel that they have to do. So you are finding this confidence coming in women, which is a beautiful thing because they've been suppressed for so long. So it's beautiful to see it. But again, it's a worry for your society because there must be a balance. If it's all men too much and little of women, society is not good. If it's all women and little of men, society is not good. So you have to find that balance. So that's really where I think, I'm just talking about the underlying thing that I see about the confidence, but we may have other suggestions on.
I think I agree with you, Toye, largely. So we go back to the home. So the parents need to balance in telling the girl that you need to work hard, you need to work well, you need to work effectively. You also need to be telling the boy that you also need to work as hard, you also need to work confidently. You also need to do things perceiving and striving for excellence. The equation, you'll see, the boy is left to be watching TV with the remote control. The girl is cleaning the room, she's in the kitchen. So that's where we start the lack of balance, or the imbalance, so to speak. So I always go back to the home. When you balance it from that level, it grows balanced. But let me come to the issue of confidence and arrogance. Yes, I agree with you 110%. There's a very thin line, but you can be confident and humble. That's the difference. You are confident and humble. Confidence means that you are sure of your own capacity and capabilities without rubbing it off everybody's face or anybody's face, And you need to be humble. You need to be respectful. And you need to also know that regardless who you are, what you achieve, there are always many other people that are better than you and have achieved more. When you have all of that at the back of your mind, you will be confident in your own abilities. You will know what you're capable of achieving. And you will know that you can dig deep and achieve a lot more. But you will be humble about it. And you won't throw it in anybody's face.
Thank you so very much, AI. And talking about achievements leads me to this next question from our anonymous attendee. How do you emphasize to a man that there's more to manhood than money, especially in a society like ours that literally worships money and power? I've tried, but can't seem to break through to my friends. Values, principles, empathy still haven't translated to the next gen, and I don't blame them because it's what they see everywhere. My friends focus on chasing money and aren't necessarily present in their families the way AI spoke about. How do you shift the thinking of what manhood should be? And this is for all the panelists. And there's something that is aligned to that. So I will just add that to it, or maybe we can start with that. How do you emphasize to a man that there's more to manhood than money, especially in a society like ours that literally worships money and power?
Okay, so first, I believe the best way is through examples and just sitting down and pointing out many examples. In anything, even in Nigeria, all you need to do is just go back and look at one generation away and look for all the people that had money. Just one generation away, just look at all of them and find out how many of them translated that money into their next generation. And you just find out that if I can count on my hand, I'm not sure that there are more than 2 that come to mind from that. And so you begin to see almost immediately that money in itself and the pursuit of money in the exclusion of everything else is just a wasted effort. Now, most of us will tell you that that is just the wrong thing to do. And so you begin to teach, and it's very important to teach your children the value of money. If you teach your children that money answers all things, chase it, you use it and all of that, not only will they burn very quickly. They will learn the hard way that money can disappoint, it will fly away, it will empty, it will finish you, and you have to learn the hard way. So about life examples is probably your best way. Given your personal, because we've all made mistakes, every single one of us can tell you stories about money and what money has done, lessons that we've learned. Share those lessons. Share those lessons. For me, it's a bit easier because I do a lot of public speaking. And so I've shared so many times about going bankrupt, making mistakes and all of that. So those kind of things happen. So share it. Those lessons are life lessons. If the man does not want to learn from that and he wants to try himself, he should go out. He would also find out that there's nothing new under the sun. They would also find out very quickly that you make mistakes. So I think it's about learning. Just learn from experience, but you don't have to experience, you don't have to make the same mistakes that others have made, which is why I said, just if you look, you don't have to go far. Just look at what has happened to people before you, and you will see that it's a big problem.
I agree very much with Tonya on that. You know, when I was growing up in the 60s, it wasn't money that moved the society. The people we had respect for tremendously were the professors and the top civil servants and the great judges. You know, not the money people were relegated to the back. You know, nobody took them very seriously. In public gatherings, nobody even acknowledged them. We then saw over the years that started shifting a bit and everything started moving towards. So again, I go back to the whole, you know, you need to be able to inculcate in your kids that it's more about who you are, the values you bring to the table, rather than the money that you're able to amass or accumulate. You can only sleep on one bed. And if COVID didn't teach us anything, COVID should have taught everybody that money really doesn't matter. People had humongous money and they couldn't do anything about it. And the only thing that mattered during COVID was family and friends. As simple as that, you know. So I think those are, like Tonya said, you know, you just need to keep giving people examples, you know. When I was starting out life, you know, my objective wasn't money. My objective was institution building. And it goes partly to what Tonya was saying about second generation money. And I say this when I speak publicly, that part of the problem of Nigeria is that if you look very carefully, there's no private sector capital that has gone to a full second generation. So Nigeria must always be an underdeveloped country because generationally, every generation is reaccumulating capital that has dissipated. So until the private sector learns to keep accumulated capital, forget Abuja and all what's happening in government or whatever. The private sector itself is, you know, is culpable because we don't have capital that has grown second, third, fourth, fifth generation. If you look in developed societies, you have second, third, fourth generation capital that keeps amassing. You know, we haven't done that in Nigeria. We haven't done it well. So, you know, people like Tonya that have built big businesses, I hope that they've also put in place sustainability so that the capital they've amassed will not be dissipated. One of the things I was clear about as a lawyer, as a young lawyer, and I was exposed very early, always traveling internationally to other law firms, and I saw 200, 300-year-old law firms internationally. And I didn't see any Nigerian law firm that has sustained at the top for 30 years at the time. And I wondered why. So my own ambition was to build an institution that would sustain. My ambition wasn't money. You know, it was to build an institution that would sustain. And I always know if you work hard enough and well enough, you would always have enough money to meet your needs. And that's all you need, actually. You don't need much more than that. Every other thing is a bonus, you know. So that's the way. And if you teach your children that, you know, you teach them, you teach them about hard work, you know, about creative work, about honesty, about integrity, you know, they will never go wrong. You know, it'll take time. One of the things I see, because I meet with a lot of young boys particularly, they think that they need to make that money tomorrow. And I laugh at them. And I tell them that, you see, you have to read a lot, you know. I think it was that what I was talking about, reading your time. You know, you have to read about the history of those who have made massive fortunes and how you must learn to, a child is born, the child is carried by the mother, you climb your mother's back, you crawl, you walk, you run. You know, you're not born and start running, you know, and they want to be born and start running. And I say it doesn't work that way, you know. So you have to go through a process and they need to learn that and we need to teach them that. But you know, it's not about money. Money is by the way. The richest people in the world today didn't set out to make money. If you look at the Forbes list of the richest people, they didn't set out to make money. the 10 richest people in the world. Money was a byproduct of the things set up.
Thank you so very much, AI. I had mentioned at the beginning that we were going to shake some tables, and I've got a question here that threatens to do just that. Audrey says, over the past few years, I have spent so much time counseling young women whose husbands have completely abdicated the financial responsibilities in the home to them. And I mean everything: rent, school fees, feeding, diesel, fuel, hospital bills, domestic health salaries, even family vacation costs. Yet at the same time, it appears the husbands also resent them for doing this and then try to lord it over them through physically, emotionally, and psychological behaviors. Why do you think this is, and what suggestions do you have for dealing with this? Another person sent to me a question. Her question was very simple, and she put it in pidgin English. Why is it that when we lift hands small to help, it could just leave them for the woman? Just tying it into Audrey's question. Dakpo, you want to lead the conversation there?
You've given me a very tough question. I'm not sure why these issues arise, right? I think perhaps, again, it goes back to these questions of value system, questions of ego, question of the issue of appreciating, the role of a woman, of a wife, right? And understanding that really in a marriage or that sort of family unit or partnership, it's important to have a shared view of life, a shared approach to how you do things. This question of ego really shouldn't be there. I think part of it is perhaps the pressure that society places on young men. This pressure that makes them believe that the man needs to do everything. And when they find that there are obstacles in their way of being the sole provider and their wives step up, there is then this resentment that develops. So part of it perhaps also is, perhaps finding a way to surround those kind of people or expose them to the right type of influences, so they understand that, the sort of situation that they find themselves in is perhaps not unique to them. They're not the first one. There are others who have experienced it and managed to overcome whatever challenges that they may be facing that would have resulted in those situations. I think it's a really tricky one. For me, right, in my own home, in my own relationship with my wife, there are times when we've had to support one another. And, part of the way we get through it is open communication and having, 100% understanding of each other, being open, this issue of being vulnerable as well. Men not wanting to show their vulnerability to their spouses or for their children, perhaps leads to some of these frustrations. If you are hiding your vulnerabilities and you don't express yourself, you find it difficult to express yourself to anyone, then some of these negative outcomes emerge and result in some of these difficulties that people have. In this new society that we're in, and especially in our own environment, I also think, there's a role that I think perhaps our religious leaders are feeling or have felt, where I think more professionals can contribute in terms of, so couples therapy, for example. I'm not sure how prevalent it is in our own environment. The sense I get is that it's something that most people would think of as something negative, right? I think there are very many ways of dealing with some of these situations.
Let me just add a few things.
Yeah.
Dako, it's clear to my mind that if you're a responsible man, except you are totally not able You will never allow your wife to do everything and then you abscond your responsibilities or dual responsibility, depending on how you guys work out your family life. So you must be totally irresponsible, you must be totally selfish and totally self-absorbed for you to allow your wife to take all the responsibilities and you able to and then not contribute. So that's clear in my mind. And then goes back to the value system from the home. If you are brought up to be self-absorbed, selfish, and irresponsible, then it manifests when you marry, And so the home, and then maybe the school. When we're in secondary school, some of the things that the home didn't catch in secondary school caught, But these days, I'm not very sure about what happens in secondary school. So the home has a lot more responsibility to make sure we catch everything at home. So for me, clearly, if you are brought up responsibly, you are brought up to care for people, you're brought up to be open-minded and charitable, and you're brought up not to be selfish, to be selfless. Because this thing about growing up as a man, as a family man, as a boss, you really must be selfless. You must put other people before yourself. And like you said, Dapo, your family comes first. So your family totally comes before you. Then, you extend your friends, depending on the kind of friendships you keep. When you start a business, like you have started, like Tonya has started, I'm sure, Tonya, there was a time when your business started and you guys, the three of you that started the business, would not pay yourself any salaries until everybody else had been paid. And there were times like that, when Femi and I started the law firm and we go for months without salary, but I'd make sure everybody in the office got their salary, even got bonuses when we had, so it's part of growing up and being responsible. If you're that responsible person, it is not possible for you to allow your spouse to take all the responsibility. That means you're irresponsible. So what we must do is we must bring up our boys to be fully responsible. We must bring up our boys to be selfless, and we must bring up our boys to understand what it means to help and support. Once we do that, it won't happen. I'm very clear about that. It will only happen if the boy if it's totally impossible, and he will do his best to make up for it. I remember once, my wife thought that I was broke or something, and the next minute, I was receiving alerts. So I told her, I said, why? She said the way she'd been seeing me looking moody this last few days, she thought that maybe. I said, no, don't worry about that. But I said, since the money has entered my account, I will blow it. But honestly, that's how it works. Your spouse just feels your mood, and you feel her mood. But you can't let it happen. There are things that and sorry, Binta, and to all the other women on this program, growing up, there were just things that we were told was fully men's responsibility. And those things can never change. The house rent, or the house, the school fees, those two, they are not compromisable except you are totally incapable. And then other things follow, depending. When you start, you struggle. Your wife may do the rent once in a while, but that your ultimate goal is to get to where you take over those responsibilities fully, until where you can ask her that, keep your money is fully your money, and my money is our money. That's the ultimate, but that's where you strive to go. And we must bring up our sons to think that way.
Yeah, but
yes. Okay, sorry, Dr. Go ahead.
Yeah, so part of my, I think part of the dilemma, the twist I saw in that question, right, is, whilst I understand the role of upbringing, the role that plays in how men turn out today, I think the reality is that there are grown men today who are married today, and I think that's the angle that question came from, who have turned out this way. They've abdicated their responsibility completely. So the question in my mind then is, what do we do? How do we address men like that today? Adult men. How do we support them? How do we make them, turn a new leaf, so to speak?
Do you have the answer? Do you have the answer to that? Okay. So I was going to answer, but I was going to try and address that, and it's a difficult thing because at a particular point in life, you are almost set in your ways, but it's never too late to change. So what I was going to say to Audrey, because I know Audrey, and I know that she's already doing this, and she's just thrown this so that she can give us trouble in our lives. But however, the first thing that you must do is that you must speak truth to this situation. You can't hide, you can't quote it, you can't. The man needs help. He needs help. He's either upbringing, everything is wrong there. It's it's wrong at so many levels. Now, the biggest mistake you can do is ignoring it, or just thinking that you can pray it into being, or just walk away that it will happen, just wait and it will change. It's not going to change. Now, truth has to be told. And at that point, you need to bring in people, mentors, people who can speak to. He needs help. He needs to be taken out. He needs counseling. That person there's something about his self-confidence that has gone totally. He no longer feels that he can, and he's taking, there's a second part of that question that says that he starts getting frustrated and hitting out at the women and all of that for resenting her for doing that aspect of it. He knows he cannot do it because his confidence is gone. He's going into depression. He's going into all sorts of things. And so there's a case for help there. And he's only hitting out at the woman for doing things that he knows, like Aswe said, these are natural things that he should do. Or should I say, maybe not natural is the right word. These are things that he should not compromise, that he must to parent and all. And so he begins to resent himself, right, for not being able to do that. And it becomes an issue. We must be able to speak truth to them and help them. Now, some want to be helped, others don't want to be helped. Now, to the woman that is remaining in that kind of marriage, man, I pray for you. That's not easy.
Thank you. We've got 15 more minutes to go to the end of today's.
Binta, just very quickly, Tonya, the sad part is that some of them don't want to be helped. That really is the sad part. For those who want to be helped, that's clear. For those who don't want to be helped, that's the really difficult part. And that's where I get to the woman that I do this.
We bow for, because it can't be for a woman staying in that marriage. I can't. No. It can't end well. I can't.
Well, thank you for your honesty. We've got 14 minutes to the end of today's very interesting discussion. We've got a couple of questions we'd like to just take very quickly. So I'd like to appeal to my panelists to give short answers and just go straight to the point with these questions. AI, a question for you. How do you redirect a male child that has been led astray by peer pressure? And if you can just pack that on that side. Dapo, a question for you. One thing women should avoid doing is bad-mouthing the absent father if they want to raise strong men with high emotional IQ. What other advice can you give? Women should avoid bad-mouthing the absentee father if they want them to raise strong men with high emotional IQ. What other advice can you give, Dapo? And I'll come to you now, PT. Yemisi would like to know, would you describe yourself as a feminist? Are you a he for she? You've got girls, would you describe yourself as a feminist? Now I've got this very interesting one where it says, what impact has the infantilization of the younger generation by older generations had on men and society as a whole? The person was kind enough to clarify and said, what I mean by that is that in some cultures, for example, a boy is considered a man when he turns 13, obviously in the Jewish culture, if I remember correctly. But in comparison, over here, a 40-year-old is still referred to as a youth. And I'll just leave that open for any of you. So we will do that. But AI, to add to your question, just because we're trying to round up very quickly, when you say it gets to a point where you tell your wife your money is your money and my money is our money, right? Does it not negate what you are saying that men should move away from the notion that they must be the only breadwinners? Does it not place more pressure on a man? You might want to take the two together. Dapo, are you ready? PT?
Yes. So the question, all right. So I absolutely agree that in single parent homes where the mother, is the one taking care of the kids, you should avoid bad-mouthing the father. One of the reasons I say that is that over time it could have, and I think I've seen this, at least in my own experience, negative effects on the children's development, emotionally and psychologically. I think one of the things that such a mother ought to try and do as early as possible, when the children perhaps are at the right level of emotional maturity, is to be open with the situation and circumstances with those children, so they understand what's going on, right? And as much as possible, try and provide a supportive network that can provide some of the influences that a male figure in the home perhaps would have provided if the father had remained in the house. It's also important for the mother to be, actively involved, I think, in those children's lives, as well as in our environment. If you have an extended family that you can reach out to, an extended family that is able to provide, that support system or network to those children as well.
Thank you so much, DA. Right. Okay.
Let me just try and answer this question very quickly. The one about your money being your money and my money being our money is just my way of showing appreciation to the strong support that my spouse gave me in the early days. When her wallet was my wallet, her money was my money. So that's just what it is. Just show appreciation, and in showing that appreciation, it's not that I'm saying that there's no balance of the home and both parties shouldn't contribute. I'm just saying that the stage I'm at now is that I'm showing appreciation for the support you gave me when I needed that support very strongly in my starting out years. So that's just what it is. It's nothing more than that. But I am a firm believer that everybody should carry their weight in the home as much as possible. But you get to a point in life where you feel that you've been well blessed, or you've been blessed enough, and you can ask your wife to turn her work into her hobby. And when that's the ideal situation, and she's doing that as a hobby. If she makes money, fine. If she doesn't, fine. She'll not starve. So that's it for me. It's just thank you. That's all it is. On the issue of the male child led astray by peers, yeah, I'll tell you a story. And it's very easy. And I know you said we should be quick about this, so I'll try and be quick. It's very easy. Women are stronger of character, and so women can get led astray too, but it takes a lot more doing. Guys are not as strong of character as women in our growing up years, because like Toyin said, the woman matures faster, or the girl matures faster. The girl, she's exposed faster, and so she's stronger of character, and she makes up her mind what she wants to do quicker. In growing up, very quickly you can, jump into friends that take you this way or that way. But I still go back to the home. One of the things that stayed with me, and I don't think is unique to me, I think it's to a lot more people because I have friends. One of the things that stayed with me is that it's not that I didn't do naughty things, but at the back of my mind was, what if my parents hear? And it stays with me till today. So I still take my decision. I can still do naughty things or not do naughty, but I at the back of my mind, and I grew up in an environment, I grew up in Ibadan where everybody was your auntie. So I go into Ibadan today, I go into All Saints Church, our family church. I run into that, my 90-year-old auntie, and she hits me with her handbag that's naughty boy. I haven't heard from you for, and okay, maybe somebody is following me and he says, this is my chairman that they're knocking on the head. She knocks me on the head and I take it, so that's how it is. It's an upbringing thing. So till today, when I'm going into where I grew up or the area I grew up, I'm making sure that my shirt is well tucked in, I'm well, so it's the upbringing thing. I still ask myself questions today. What if my parents hear wherever they are? So it's important, if you build that kind of strong thing in your child growing up, even when they're doing the naughty thing, they know they're doing something naughty and they quickly run back from it, And for me, that was what determined and kind of tried to keep me as less naughty as possible,
Okay. Thank you. So it's that moral compass, and it starts from the home, essentially. Yeah. PT, you wanted to say something on the back of that?
I'll just answer my question. Oh, Dapo has answered his questions, right?
Yes, he has. So over to you.
All right. So, and everything is aligning very beautifully. So you asked about the infantilization of the Nigerian youth, something like that. Yeah. we have two different types of Nigerian youth. You have the elitist ones, and you have the ones who are out there. You see, the general Nigerian youth is an adult long while he's still a teenager. Just look at them, look out, just please take a look outside, and you will find out that the larger population of your Nigerian youth is already an adult long before they become of voting age. So I don't think that that issue is really where the problem is. Some cultures have a tradition where they transfer and say you have become an adult and all of those things. Others just happen naturally. But the main aspect of this is that most people have a decision to make. If your decision is that you are going to sit down, fold your hands, and blame everybody for your own trouble, then you are going to be old, waiting for them to hand over something to you. One of the things that we're seeing with the EndSARS protests and all of that is a youth deciding, a whole youth bulge deciding that at this point in time, they will come into their own. They will speak for themselves. They will do what they can do. And you can see the organization behind. They've always been there. We've always known that Nigerians are smart. We've always known that they can do anything. We've known that we're industrious and all of that. And the only difference now is that there's an expression of all of that in unity, so that all of that is coming out. We're seeing, but there's nothing that is happening that is a surprise to a Nigerian about what a Nigerian is capable of, because it's always been there. So I think in that particular aspect, it's a mind thing. Those who have held power for a long time have used youth as an excuse to stay on for as long as possible. So you can be an 80-year-old youth. Why? Yeah, we're all youths, but I think it's semantics. Today, you decide what you want to do, and you cannot hold yourself and just blame others. Just get up and do it. There are many people who are already on the streets, many people who are doing what they can do, many people who are making a life of themselves, doing business, doing work, entrepreneurship, and all of that. The last part of what I want to answer, I can't remember if it was in the last question, but there was something that Asri said, yeah, about money, your money is your money and all of that. But there's just one thing. Okay, you asked whether I was a feminist. Somebody asked if I was a feminist and all of that, and he for she. Absolutely. He for she, I'm a he for she ambassador. Every time that they want to talk about women, whether it's on WIMBIS or different panels at United Nations, I'll find myself on panels, 5 women on this side, 5 women on that side. I'm the only man, and being asked questions about how to change the world and women and all of that. So for me, it's not a problem. I have no issues with that. But there's something that, as we said, which I have discovered through life, and I want to use this to at least say my final statement, and it is this, right? Every woman that I know, right, wants to be able to work, to express herself, do what she wants to do, chase her dream and all of that, but wants at any point in time to be able to just decide that I'm not going to work again and just come back home. End of story. Just walk away from the job. Just walk away from the job that day and come back home, and it's not a problem. For them, it's not an issue. So they don't mind pushing, going to work, waking up, being the career woman and all, but the day they decide that I'm not working again, they just want to be able to just work. And that remains at the back of every woman's mind. It doesn't matter how much they are pushing, how much they are driving. That ability to just get up and say they're not doing again and they'll go home is a right that every woman wants to hold on to. For men, it's the other way around. Every man, right, wants to work, and they want to work till, well, when I say every, and I'm generalizing the same way as women, but they want to work all the way through, sort of because they kind of know somewhere that they cannot just get up and say that they're not working again and they want to stay at home. Hence, the man who is sitting and expecting the woman to do all the things. If it was a woman that was sitting at home with all the man doing all of those things, it's not a problem. We will not be having an issue. Why? Because it's okay. For the man, it's okay. Do everything, pay all the bills, do all of those things. It's okay. It's not okay when it's a woman doing the same. And the reason being that a woman, at the end of the day, work hard, do everything that she wants to do and all of that. But the day that she wants to turn her job to a hobby, be ready to support. Don't start again. Just support her. It's beautiful. My wife is doing that right now. Our medical job is now a hobby, and it's beautiful. It's okay. Sit down, enjoy the money. Our money is your money. You have done well. You have given me 3 beautiful children. They are beautiful. They are enjoy. Just enjoy.
Thank you so very much, BT. Mr. Gajalo, your last words for us in 1 minute or less.
No. I just want to say that I thank the founder. I think this is very important. It's critical because I was also getting worried about this Generation Z. I'm seeing the girls really moving fast ahead. I'm not seeing the boys moving at that pace. And I'm beginning to wonder who will marry the girls and what kind of arrangements they will have in their homes. So I'm a bit worried. So I think this is a fantastic thing. I think we need to be talking to a lot more boys. I have a group of young men that I'm mentoring and I'm talking to, and they need to be able to step up. They need to be able to be responsible, selfless, passionate. They need to be able to know that they need to take care of their family, their spouse, and their parents, and their friends. So life can be good with God's major blessings, but you have to make it good, and you have to ensure that you are humble, and you're not. If you are humble and you're not greedy, you'll be fine. Thank you very much. And Mrs. Idigbe, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been a major eye-opener, and I've enjoyed participating. And Binta, thank you for a great job. Thank you. And guys, thank you. I didn't expect less from True King's College boys.
All right. I'd just like to say a big thank you for the opportunity to be part of this panel. It's been most insightful, especially being in the midst of gentlemen like Aswe Godalo and Tonye Cole. I've learned a great deal from the insights they shared with us this evening. I absolutely believe that there's a strong case to be made for focusing on the development of men, especially in our own environment, as opposed to the traditional focus, right, on women. But ultimately, what I think is if we support men, ultimately, we're also supporting women, right? Absolutely. And that's where these sort of conversations become extremely useful and critical. And I really do wish that, and I believe that these conversations are here to stay, and there will be more and more of them in future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Dakwal. Now I'd like to bring on the visionaire, the woman who had this brilliant idea and who started this Boys to Men initiative, Mrs. Ifeoma Idigbe. Thank you so much. You've heard the gentleman. This has been a highly needed conversation, and it's because of your initiative that we're having this very important conversation today. So thank you so very much. I'll just hand over to you for a few words before we round up. I'd like to apologize to our online audience. We've gone just a few minutes over time, but we'll be done in a short while. Mrs. Idigbe.
Thank you very much. Aswe Dakwatoye, I can't thank you enough for agreeing to participate in this webinar. And I think your comments, the whole conversation, validates the reason why Boys to Men Foundation was set up. Like you, I looked around, and each time I see women excelling. And even though they excel, they're not necessarily in the positions they should occupy, because we have a cultural bias towards men being in charge. But also because I'm surrounded by men, I have 2 sons, I thought to myself, there's a problem here. If we don't do something about the boys, we'll have a problem. As you mentioned, who will our daughters marry? And who will take over and make sure that our country and our society is how it should be? And so for me, it was a no-brainer that something needed to be done. 2 important things that came across throughout the conversation. The first is the imperative of good parenting. And what is good parenting? Essentially, it's about teaching our children the importance of hard work, responsibility, a value system. This focus is usually on the girls. And so privilege can be an albatross around our necks. And so privilege has become an albatross around the necks of the men. About what can I do to succeed in the world through hard work and my own effort? efforts supported by others. Not that I have a place of entitlement and therefore I should just sit and wait for the world to come to me, which it does in patriarchal societies. The second is the importance of value systems. You know, without values, we wouldn't have the right mindset. Without the right mindset, we wouldn't have the right attitude. And without the right attitude, we won't behave as we should. And so it is important. And there's a point that one of the panelists made to the effect that women tend to be more, what's that word? We're better at doing the right thing, to put it kindly, than the men are. And so for them, the end justifies the means. Whereas we are not quite like that, you know. And I often say that when I pray, when my children were growing up, I never thought of praying for wealth. It was always about the family. And I think many women are like that. And it's not that money and wealth are not important. It's just that it's not the beginning and the end for us. And that makes a difference. And the point also that when you do what it is you love doing, you will succeed and you will make money from it. It follows. That's what it follows. Now, our value system for Boys to Men Foundation, we have three. Our motto is leadership, integrity, leadership, and equity. And that represents, if you have integrity, there are things you won't do. Your word is your bond. It's just a given. If you want to lead, you lead as a follower and you understand what it is that the people you're leading want and you choose to do it. And then if you believe in equity and justice, the world will be the way it should be. And so those three words for us symbolize a lot. And if all our men and all our women took those things seriously, I don't think that #EndSARS would have arisen, because we wouldn't have forced the youth into a position where they now have to speak up for the values that we are supposed to have taught them. We did a small survey at some point, and we found out that men said that there are two key drivers for them. The first is securing the future, and the second is having a support structure. And that is therefore what we try to do. To secure the future essentially is to, how do you get work? How do you have the life skills that enable you to work and survive in the environment? Whilst we can't get jobs for people, we can develop the men through our various programs, and that's one of the things that we do. And then the support structure, the platform itself allows men and boys to interact. And our platform is interactive. They can post things, and we always post things. We have mentorship programs with some organizations, KPMG being one of them, FSDH being another, and for individuals as well, who are mentors to members of Boys to Men Foundation. And they're role models to them. We have webinars such as this one and podcasts, and as I said, sharing on our platform. And so what it is I think, the ball is in your court, men, I think. And it's important for you to accept that if you want privilege, there's responsibility that comes with privilege. And that therefore, you should and take up the challenge, work hard. Nobody has a right to success without work. It doesn't last. And I think that's, again, something one of the panelists has said. I think it was you talked about the idea of generations. Without a value system, it's not going to happen. And I do think it's very important to engage with your wives, which is something that Dapo talked about a lot in terms of having a common understanding about which way forward, what do we do? Women are intelligent, just as men are. And we have a voice, and we like to use that voice. And I can say for myself that I often say to people that the greatest thing that my husband has done for me is to let me be. If I wanted to become president today, his only question would be, can you face the politics? Can you deal with the politics? And if my answer was yes, he'd say, good for you. I'll stand with you, but just be sure that I won't be at every dinner where I'm the president's wife, you know, because I also have a life to live. So that's really what it is. And I think that the success of a man, the success of a woman, all help the children to identify success in a certain way, not just about money, but about working hard, about defining values, about defining what achievement means to you. And in that way, we'll raise a society of excellent men and women. We won't ask the question, who will our daughters marry? We won't ask the question, what will our sons be doing when we're not looking? We will know for sure that both of them will be a source of pride to us. And that's what Nigeria needs. And that's exactly what I think #EndSARS is about. And I think that's a good place to say thank you very much to all of you for participating, and Binta for your excellent moderation. So I'm handing back to you, Binta. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Mrs. Adigbe. Truly an honor and a pleasure for me as well. Thank you, Mr. Ighodalo, Mr. Cole, Mr. Akinsoya. It was excellent having this conversation with you all. Thank you to our online audience and for keeping faith and staying with us, even though we ran over time a bit. Forgive us, but the conversation was too interesting for us to cut it short. And on this note, would like to off the mic and just say, have a very good time.
Off the mic.
Thank you very much, Binta, and thank you for my again. And guys, catch up with you sometimes.
Thank you very much.
They said that fathers have not gone out to protest, so ask me.
You have to go.
Fathers have gone out to protest.
Yeah,
you have to go, so it's okay.
They said
yes,
that.
I gotta support my girls, don't worry.
Fathers have not gone out, so we'll see you.
Did you see the video calling for the 40s and 50s sets to come out?
And then they will call us 60s, don't worry. Take care, guys.
All right then.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.